He will win when he will win. Who knows when to fight and when not to fight? Sun Tzu. All right, welcome to another morning episode of the Liberty Dad podcast, a discussion on politics and culture. If you're tuning in live, I want to especially thank you for giving me your time so early. This morning, I have an interesting story to tell you that happened literally yesterday. I took my son to the park and an incident almost happened. So then after the fact, I got home and I was thinking about it, telling my wife, and I thought, this would be a good story to tell the audience and then kind of give some of my afterthoughts on the matter. And then I had a further thought. I said, you know what? This would actually be a good opportunity to get Maj Toure on the show and discuss maybe anything where I went wrong or, just some advice in general for people, because this is an event that could have happened to anybody. Just simple, almost fight. How you doing, buddy? All right, so let's go ahead and bring in Maj, and we're gonna kick this show off. Maj, how are you, sir?
What's up? How you?
Very well. Still here, even though I'm trying to start trouble at the local park.
No doubt.
So,
All right,
but
what is this? What is this scenario you have, bro?
okay, so I'm gonna put this. I'm gonna put something up on the screen here so we can kind of see a picture of the park as I'm telling this story. And where did it go? Where's the button here? Give me a second. Wrong button there. Usually have these things queued up a little bit better. Off my A game, I guess, a little bit this morning. So don't mind me, folks. Where is it? Well, as soon as I find it, I will get it up on the screen. I don't know why it's not showing up here. Give me just a moment here, folks. It's being uncooperative. Let's try this one more time. We'll try to put it up on the park. So basically, yesterday after work, I took my son to the park, and it's about a mile from my house. So just so everybody knows, the area that I live in is like 60% old retirees. And then the rest of them is some mixture of families. So it's a really nice neighborhood. It's not gated or anything like that, but it is a really nice neighborhood. And the area that I live in is actually pretty nice as well. Like it's pretty decent. Like it's not the rich area, but it's, low crime. You don't really see, mostly what we hear is maybe some people speeding down the road on their motorcycles or something late at night.
Yeah.
So nothing tremendous. And, you might see some neighbors squawking about, some kids, checking doors and stuff like that on the cars, just, kind of standard stuff. Nothing out of the ordinary.
Yeah.
So we're at this park, and here I'll put it up on the screen. Now I got it queued up. So here's like a picture of the park. Now this is actually in the park, and out toward where it's really far out, that would be the parking lot. And then you can and I'll zoom in a little bit. There's a table right here with with a person sitting. Now this is not a picture I took. It's just from Google. And then what you can't see is, if I was the one to take the picture, behind me, there would be some like gym equipment that you could go and do some exercising on.
Okay.
So what happened is there's about 3, maybe 4 mothers there, and there's probably about 8 or 9 kids, mostly young kids. And there might have been one that was like 12 or 13 or something like that. But most of them are about 5 or 6, 7, right? And so they're running around doing their thing. And my son I guess he wasn't, really up to it. So he's over here. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. That's the wrong picture. So he's over here to the side, and I walk over and I'm talking to him, and they're like, "Hey, buddy, why don't you, go play with the other kids and whatnot?" And so down here where the green meets the pavement, I hear not really a commotion, but I just hear one of the moms say something like, "Oh, he's got an egg on his head. We're gonna have to leave." And so she grabs like 3 or 4 of the kids, and then she goes on to leave. And I think the other mother said, like, "Sorry, kids just playing," or something like that. So I didn't really think much of it, because I'm like, all right, cool. They're probably one kid knocked the other kid down, and the one that had the egg was probably about 3. It was very small.
Wait,
So anyway,
what's the egg?
like egg on the head. Like I think the kid got bumped and knocked down or something like that.
Oh, like a knot on his head.
Yeah, like a little knot on the head. All right. And it didn't seem to me, it seemed like it was relatively, standard bump on the head. Mom takes kid home, whatever. I didn't really think much of it. So a few minutes later, now I'm sitting at this table where this person is right here,
Mm-hmm.
and then my kid was actually where behind the camera at this point. So then the mother, one of the mothers is kind of like right over by where this trash can is. And so then all of a sudden I start hearing this screaming. This dude is yelling. So he comes over and he's yelling and screaming and he's angry. I mean, like very, very angry. And he's yelling at the mom and he's like, your kid, your little badass kid hurt my kid, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, look, he said he was sorry. And so, he's kind of yelling at her. And at one point, she doesn't seem phased at all. Okay. And so at one point, she's like, look, sir, she's really polite to him. She's like, "Look, sir, Jesus loves you." And he's like, "Take it." And like, and now that kind of further irritates him, but he's yelling. And then he's telling his lady, he was like, get her phone number. He's like, "Oh, we're gonna have to go to the hospital. I'm going to pay for this. You're paying for this." And and the woman's like, "Look, they were just kids playing, okay? Like they got hurt." Which was kind of my perspective because I'm like, it didn't seem like anything out of the ordinary. I mean,
Right.
my son's bumped his head literally at the same place.
Shit
Um,
happens. They're children, and it's a playground. Like
Right, right.
it happens.
So he's angry. Now he's yelling and he does other than yelling and screaming and cursing and swearing, he doesn't really seem to be a threat other than that, however people see that as a threat.
Yeah.
But I'm sitting there because at the time, I'm the only other man there. So I'm like, all right, well, my son is safely away. He's a good 40 feet away and he's doing his thing. And this man's yelling at a woman. So, and he's both of them are like 5 feet from me. They're not very far. I could have stood up and grabbed one of them.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, "All right, well, I'll just stay here in case something happens," because as I've said on the show before, I believe in chivalry and like, hey, if you see, a woman getting hit by a man, you intervene, right? So I'm like, I'll just sit here. Well, here's where I think I made my mistake. After a while, the man kinda goes back to the car, and you can kinda see, like, up in this corner, that's about where his car was. So he's kind
Wait, hold up.
Yep.
Yo, were you armed?
No.
You
So that
wild, but go ahead.
that might be my first mistake. Uh,
Right.
but my first mistake in terms of the story itself was I'm sitting here and basically what the man is doing is he started out yelling and carrying on right here, right about in front of this trash can. And then he's basically going kind of back and forth, not quickly, but kind of slowly going up there, yelling and screaming, coming back a little bit, yelling, screaming, going up there, yelling, screaming. So this all takes place over about maybe a 10 to 15-minute period.
Mhm.
Finally, I'm getting annoyed. Now, this is, I think, where I made my personal mistake. I get annoyed because the kids can't really play. My son's way over. He's not able to play. I'm distracted by observing this man. So I'm not able to watch my kid in the way that I want and just
Yeah.
let him play. And if my son had come over here, I would have been like, no, no, go back over there. So he can't even freely enjoy the fullness of the park because in my mind, like this man at a minimum is being a very serious distraction.
Mhm.
We'll put it that way. So I finally get up and he's yelling and screaming. He's like, he's like, I'll bond out. I don't care. Blah, blah. Just like all kind of crazy stuff. Right. And so finally I get irritated. When I get irritated, well, that's when I start speaking my mind. So I get up and I'm like, dude, do we need to call the police or what?
Mhm.
Now, I think that was the first big mistake. You could tell me your thoughts because the man's already angry. He's already telling everybody how he'll bond out. So clearly, threatening the police is not really probably in the best interest of anybody. And so now he's angry at me. So he starts yelling at me. He comes toward me. So now I'm somewhere between this table and like say this big tree here. I'm on the
Mhm.
path. He comes toward me and he gets right up in my face. And I mean nose to nose.
Third
And
mistake.
and so then and at this point, he's yelling in my face and screaming and spitting, and I'm like, I can smell that he's at least had 1 beer, maybe more. Um, and so there I am, nose to nose with this guy, and the guy he's bigger than me. Okay, like I mean, it's not hard to be bigger than me. I'm 5'3" and I weigh 120 pounds, so it's not very difficult. But he was probably about 4 inches taller than me. and outweighed me by a good 50 pounds at least. So I'm clearly at a disadvantage, at least in terms of size. And so then he's screaming and yelling at me, and he was like, what would you do if it was your kid? And I was like, so now my kid's here. I'm going to be a little bit more polite, but I'm like, I wouldn't, I was like, I wouldn't be at the park, effing yelling at everybody and making kids scared. I was like, I would take him to the damn hospital. It's right down the road. And he's like yelling, and, so we're kind of face to face. Now, what I did do, just so people know, I understand certain things about a tense situation like this. Number one, I didn't ball up my fist, right? I very intentionally, because to me that kind of shows aggression, and it kind of almost it can I've seen it initiate a fight. Just someone like, oh, you're gonna swing on me, and then all of a sudden, somebody gets the first shot in, right? So I didn't do that. I didn't touch the man, and I never called him any names, or I did what I thought would not exacerbate the situation, even if I wasn't exactly de-escalating it. Go
How
downstairs
did
and
it
do it.
end up?
So how it ended up, the man eventually walked away, and then I came back over, and I'm like, all right, well, people are starting to leave now. So then I asked the woman, who does not seem phased by this. I'm like, are you gonna, and by this time there was another man there. And I was like, are you gonna be okay, ma'am? And she's like, I will be just fine. Thank you, sir. And I was like, okay. So then I took my son, and then we left. Now, in the time when I said, "What do we need to call the police?" I actually had. And then I slipped the phone in my pocket, and then he's like yelling at me, and he's like, "I dare you to call the police." And so now I'm like, all right, well, I'm not going to pull it out and show him that I'm calling the police, because that seems like it will just exacerbate the situation.
Hmm.
And he didn't realize it, but I could hear the police trying to talk to me on the phone.
Mm.
And, but I just left it in my pocket, and I said nothing. And then when I got home, I realized that they had actually hung up the phone and then called me back. So then I called them back, and I just let them know, where the situation had ended. And it ended with most everybody leaving the park, and I had left before the other man left.
Okay.
Um, and so that's the story. So, all right, tell me, tell me every mistake that I made, and let's talk about this.
DL, you my man, so I gotta tell you. I gotta ask
Bring
you
it
this first.
straight. Bring it straight.
Do you want me to tell you the truth, or do you want me to tell
Absolutely.
you what you want? I
Absolutely.
think you want to hear.
Because no, I want to hear the truth, because the point of bringing you on was I want others to have the right mindset if they ever get into this altercation, and also myself. You know what? Uh, when I was younger, I ran the streets a little bit, and a little bit of bravado, blah blah blah. But that's not necessarily good behavior. And I'll be honest, it's been a while, like high school, since
Yeah.
I've had a confrontation like that, right? So I don't think people realize I'm 45 now. I haven't been in school for like 30 years. And number one, I'm 30 years older, so there's that. But then the other thing is, I think you lose your sense of how to properly, or like, I think I might have handled it differently, maybe worse when I was younger.
Hmm.
Um, but I think when you're not in these kind of situations, you
Often.
you get all like, I think you don't think about things, and you're not prepared to do the right thing. So therefore, I think this is a great opportunity to be like, DL, here's all the terrible mistakes you made. Um, because I can point out at least a couple of them on my own. So I'm like, if I can point out a couple, somebody else can surely point out a few more. So
Yeah,
let's
bro.
help
Uh,
people out. Let's keep people safe.
So first and foremost, never go to the park unarmed
Right.
if you can help it. I mean, Florida's Florida. On one hand, Florida is amazing. On
Mhm.
another hand, Florida man exists,
Right.
right? Um, so that's your first mistake. Second mistake, engaging and
Mhm.
and just not watching. At the moment when you, so okay, let's use liberty, because this will be mostly to libertarians, right?
Mhm.
I am now in the business of trolling trolls in the liberty space. Um, these people that have had no actual interaction in real life for the most part, right? They'll try to do a thing and try to bait you online. But then when you see them in real life, they just act like they just avoid you. So
Right.
knowing that, I learned that more concretely a few weekends ago at the, the convention, the national convention. All of these people that talk all of this shit on the internet, they act like they can't see you. And then as soon as you get back to, they get back to their town, and you get back to your town, then they get back right on the internet and say stuff. So those are people that we have to figure out how to use for our benefit. And in the internet space, you can make that work for your benefit. In the real world space, there is no benefit.
Right.
You don't win fights. You survive them.
Right.
Because you don't get a prize, right? It's not like, oh, you knocked them out first and then, whatever. So first, not being armed. Second, engaging.
Mm-hmm.
The ability to watch and let somebody just play their role out.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's down to, if this guy was yelling and being a little bit annoying, that's one thing. He'll see that no one's paying him any attention. If no one pays him any attention, and fizzle out 95.9999% of the time, right? And if he's just using words, it's just words. It's annoying. If he's kind of like got some sort of a gripe based on something that happened to his child, instead of being upset with him, if I chose to engage,
mm-hmm.
I would be more in alignment with like, hey man, I would redirect that person. I would go, hey man, there's a hospital up the street. You want to ride up there? I don't know if you guys drove up here or not. Do you want to ride? Because my job is to separate this person from the other person. And he seemed to have a legitimate reason for his frustration.
Right.
That legitimate reason for his frustration is the thing that I would have leveraged to lean him in a direction away from everybody else. As well as if it seems like there's no actual threat. Obviously, if there's a real threat, you get out of there. There is no, I'm saving, especially if I'm not armed. Right. There is no, I'm getting into a scenario and I'm going to save everybody, including this woman.
Right.
Because if something goes left and an argument or a robbery or a regular fight can turn into a homicide like that.
Yep.
And if you don't have an absolute certain way of knowing that he's armed, because the other part is a lot of times when people are very rambunctious and braggadocious and overly yelling and telegraphing, they may be armed knowing that most people are not. I can smell a dude that's talking a lot of shit and he's armed. I can smell it. So if you don't have any way to know if he's armed or not, the indicators, they're called pre-fight indicators. The indicators, like you said about balling your hand up and stuff like that, these are things that make me go, I'm not armed. I don't know if his skill set. I don't know if he's armed. He's showing me some telegraphing and pre-fight indicators, and it could just all be talk. And most times, it is just all talk.
Right.
I got bail money. Bro, your kid got a knot on his head. Is this worth bail money? It wasn't a different adult who did this. It was another child.
Right.
Now, the child that did that, the mother could say, I am so sorry. I will make sure that I punish my child and da-da-da-da. That's her way of potentially de-escalating. But she didn't want to do that. She probably recognized, and I'm going to ask some questions too, in relation to this. She probably recognized that person was selling wolf tickets. If you're in a certain environment often, you can see or smell who's selling the wolf tickets. And you can choose to either troll them if it has a benefit. If it does not have a benefit, you should not do it. Especially if A, you don't know if this person is armed, or excuse me, A, you're not armed. You don't know if this person is armed. And what is the actual benefit? You troll people online that are stupid, that don't do anything and all of that, because I'm going to use you and the bots that you hire. I'm going to use that for engagement. And then I'm going to post something very productive right after that. That's the only benefit of engaging generally on social media. I'll give you a perfect example. I was invited to go to sit down with on Tim Cast with somebody that I think is a clown. And I denied it. I'm just like, this doesn't really serve. Now, I could have made it work for me because, Tim has however many followers, or the show sees how many people, right? But principally, and me not having a product to sell or a new free thing to give to people, I don't ever want to share space or engage with a clown. And unfortunately, in that scenario, because you were right and you see the goofball thing that he's doing, you wanted to go, yo, what are you doing, bro?
Right.
but there's no actual win. That's potentially all downside. You can't monetize it. You can't turn it into a conversation about liberty,
Hmm.
right? You aren't actually separating the person from the other bystanders.
Right.
So there is no actual win there. Um, Tactically, I would have, if I did choose to engage, because we always have three options when we're in these scenarios.
Hmm.
We can avoid. If we fail at avoiding, we can de-escalate, or we have to engage. You chose to engage when you could have
Yes.
avoided and or de-escalated, and you did
Correct.
that because you were right. The thing that I'll share with everybody listening is you can be right and be dead, and somebody
Right.
can be
Yep.
wrong as hell and still be alive.
Yep.
My grandmother used to say, I'd rather them say, there she go, than there she lay.
Mhm.
Right? So those are some of the biggest instances of mistakes that I saw in that space. Now, obviously, it didn't turn anything into anything negative. Um, I mean, like real, right? As
Right.
far as
Right.
negative, but the potential for those things turning into something else, even if it's just a fight. Now you got to I got to do this thing in front of my child.
Hmm.
You know what I
Hmm.
mean? It turns into, and you can, and everyone can lose. The guy that thought he was super tough, right? He thinks he's the good guy. Everybody else to him is the bad guy. But in every instance, the bad guy gets a say. In that scenario, based on the information that we have now, he's the bad guy. And the bad guy gets a say. The bad guy doesn't get to only have a say if he's right. He
Right.
thinks he's right.
Right.
So those are the biggest mistakes that I see. I want to ask this, and please, because I know everybody's going to say, what's that got to do with it? There's a cultural reason why I'm asking you.
I think I know where this is going.
What was the ethnicity of the woman? What was the ethnicity of the guy? And what was the makeup of the park? Was it the park? It wasn't the park that we was at.
No, no, no,
Okay,
way
got
on
it.
the other side of town. Way
Okay.
different side of town.
What
Um,
was the ethnicity of all of the people
at,
involved?
at this time, everybody else there that was there was black,
Mm-hmm.
which is interesting because it seems like every time I go to this park, it's
Mm-hmm.
almost like which culture day is it? Because like
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we'll go there and it seems like all the Indian kids are there.
Yeah.
Sometimes we'll go there and it's like it seems like all the black kids are there.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's like it's a little mix.
Yeah.
Um, I don't so it's a little weird. Like it doesn't seem to always just be a mix, and I
Yeah.
don't why and I don't go like at too many variations of the day or whatever. So it's just
Yeah.
weird. It's almost like people pick it and say, all right, this is our day. Let's go.
Let me say the reason why I asked that. Not
Mhm.
because, oh, the black dude's definitely going to be aggressive to the white dude. I don't think that's what it is.
Right.
I think the reason why I say between the woman and the dude is because they can read that. The woman probably read that room differently. And she's probably seen
Yep.
that dude around. And she's
Yes.
like, this guy.
Right.
Right. And I'm not engaging. And the ability to just recognize wolf tickets. She
Right.
read that scenario, in my opinion, better than you as it relates to culturally. If both of them happen to be from that same neighborhood, like definitely like or have crossed and intertwined each other's energy, probably at that park before. Here's
Right.
the other part of the conversation that we tend to not know. When I'm calling somebody and they never answer, the phrase that I always use is you never know what's happening on the other side of the phone.
Mhm.
Right? So in that scenario, you don't know if these people even dated before. You have no context clues or any background information. Now, from the general public and the unseen, the no having any knowledge, and I'm not saying they did, but it becomes they could potentially have more of a passionate engagement because they dislike each other because they've engaged each other before or they dated
Right.
before. There's so many layers to a story. When you do scenario training,
Mhm.
there's a great place called WAF that's in Florida. It's in Orlando, where our families train. They do scenario training where they have this. You go into a room, a scenario room. You have kid on, and everyone is armed with a simunition pistol. But when you come into the room, you do not know who the bad guy is. And you
Right.
might walk into the room and people just start shooting at each other. And if you're armed, you don't know who to shoot.
Right.
You're missing too much context. This could be the bad guy or that could be the good guy. This could be an undercover law enforcement officer and that dude's the rapist. You don't know. So you in that scenario, you don't shoot anybody. The point in that lesson is you don't know the context. It's too
Mhm.
many things that are missing that if you might have had a conversation with that lady in a week, she might say, yeah, I see that guy. He comes here. He has an attitude all the time. And then
Mhm.
you go, oh, Okay. So there's context missing. Unless there is a imminent threat, not a perceived threat.
Right.
Unless there is an imminent threat to life and danger, I'm not engaging. And if I'm engaging, I'm definitely pulling my firearm and I'm stopping the threat.
Right.
Somebody talking and just being annoying, at minimum, I ignore. At best, I leave.
Right. So
I
I got two
leave.
questions for you.
Sure.
And I'm glad you brought up the cultural thing because I actually was trying to think, all right, how am I going to bring this up so it doesn't sound racist, right? Um, do you, in your opinion, see a difference in like let's say we're at the engagement part, regardless of who starts it or who decides to engage, whatever, we're there now, okay?
Mhm.
Do you see a difference or observed between how a black man might be engaged versus a white man, or do you or is it in your opinion angry person is just angry person, you follow all these steps?
Angry person is angry person. In the room, the environment dictates what we're perceiving as anger. If you are new to Philly,
Hmm.
in Philly, we greet our friends. What's up, dickhead?
Hmm. Hmm.
It's an aggressive city and it's a straightforward city. You could perceive that as mean, but Philadelphians also are some of the most supportive, loving, direct. So it's just reading the room of each room. Like sometimes I remember I saw Bill Burr on the Breakfast Club, his most recent episode, and he was noted. He said, "I didn't see," because he's white. He's from Boston, right? He used to talk up. He said, and his wife is black now, and so he would be like, when I was doing comedy, I didn't. I had to learn how to engage and read the room of black people because I had to understand the types of person in each room. Because if I was doing a white comedy room, it would be that guy's an asshole. That guy seems like a good guy. But if you're not in that environment, you can't tell. It just looks like a blob of white, a blob of black, a blob of Indian, a blob of Asian, a blob of whatever. That rule of thumb applies. I can now look in most rooms and go, this dude's a shitbag.
Hmm.
Insert whatever race he is because now I can read rooms better.
Right.
Some people in those spaces, the environment goes, that dude's just selling wolf tickets for whatever reason. That dude's an actual problem for whatever reason and whatever
Mhm.
race. The cultural component is more about the environment. Hence, while the lady is like, that dude was just talking shit, and I'm not even thinking about that dude.
Right. Right.
Right?
She
From your
seemed
perspective, you're
unfazed. It was crazy.
right. From your perspective, you're thinking more as a dad and going like, dude, I can't even enjoy this time with my child because we 10 minutes into this. Inadvertently, you allow that troll energy to envelop you and when you're doing CQB and room clearing, you can't get sucked into a threat deep in the room.
Right.
You allow that energy because you were right to suck you into the threat deep in the room so then the engagement lasts longer.
Right. Right.
So in my experience, it's just watch and don't engage.
Yep. That's
And
yeah. And looking back, but even before the show, I was like, I knew I was like, I really shouldn't have said anything. Just be quiet. Like, let the man say his speech. Let him say his piece.
And if everybody doesn't feed the troll, it just goes away.
Right.
Like I pick, and all of this stuff is interconnected.
Hmm.
I pick times when I literally say, hey, today I'm gonna trigger bots. I'm gonna trigger troglodytes. I'm gonna trigger
Hmm.
trolls. I'm gonna trigger such and such. I literally say it. Then I'll say something like, why would I even want to share space with this person and his own state chapter doesn't want him in a position of leadership? He's a clown and he's a flea and he's beneath solutionaries. Remember, clowns and fleas are beneath you. That energy or that person, notice I haven't even said who the person is.
Right.
That person's energy will prompt them to now talk about me on their platform.
Right.
So there's a benefit because then I'm going to post about fundraising, the civics class, the liberty class, the
Hmm.
basic firearms class. I want to use you to repost and quote tweet me, and then I'll just ignore you.
Right.
If there's no benefit and there's no threat, imminent threat, there's the potential for a threat. But if it's not there, nope. culturally that holds firm across all of the cultural rooms that I've been in.
Okay.
But you just have to be in different rooms. Like, okay, for example, that park, I don't know the name of the park that we was in the last time I was there, right?
I can't remember at the moment, but
that park was black as hell, right?
yes. Yep.
And so all of that loud music and such as everybody, that's just like culturally, that's like if you go into a Spanish room, there's gonna be loud music. If you go into a white suburban room, there's gonna be country music, it's gonna be loud, it's gonna be barbecue, it's gonna be this, that. There's gonna be certain similarities, and everybody in that room, even with all of the loudness, can dictate and tell when there's potentially gonna be a problem. You just gotta expose to different rooms, like the Bill Burr statement, and just recognize, oh, this is the shit bag, which is minority of this room. That person is the shit bag in this room. But culturally, again, 99% of the time is nothing.
Right.
And the person is selling wolf tickets. And I'm not engaging. Because if I engage further, now his ego does this, now my ego has to do this, and now your ego has to do this. Now we got to take it to a place, or we think, or we perceive that we have to take it to a place that we could have literally just let that energy go and let it be right there.
Right.
And if you're not prepared, that's another reason why I don't put myself in some of them situations too, because after you initiate an act of aggression towards me, I'm perfectly fine and very good with violence.
Right.
And then people will hide, or they'll be like, oh, Maj did this or whatever. And so just obviously as libertarians, we submit to the non-aggression principle as much as possible. The challenge is determining what some people's ethos determine as aggression and some people do not.
Right.
I do not in any way, shape, or form take your words as aggression. Your words, or they could, let me not say that. I can take how you could try to use your words aggressively. On the man tip, I go, in manhood world, if you say these things to me outside of the non-aggression principle, there in most men's scenarios, there will be consequences for these words. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying that's usually what happens with people that do not submit to a non-aggression principle or don't even know what it is.
Right.
A lot of times people in the liberty space hide behind the non-aggression principle and say things that are in violation of manhood to other men. I did it at the Libertarian National Convention. A dude tried to have a viral moment on me, and I walked away from him. This was at the Trump thing.
Right.
And I walked away from him. And then I'm like, all right. He asked me, he said, why am I dishonest about my criminal history? And I'm like, are you talking about, first I had to clarify, are you talking about my false rape accusation that was withdrawn? Or are you talking about my deep criminal history of selling, my conviction for selling DVDs?
Right.
And he was like, the DVD thing. And I'm like, I've talked about this like at length. And I was like, all right, cool. You're just trying to have a moment. And so I walked away from him, and then he followed me. And I'm like, okay, I can bait this person and maybe turn it viral based on him now continuing after I walked away. The benefit would have been, I'll get some content, some energy off of it. It'll be cool, maybe. But then the other argument is, do you want to be the guy that's like getting into it at the first libertarian convention that a presidential candidate is coming to us? So I think about all this. I'm like, I could probably get something out of it and not fuck the mood up, right? So I was very, very disrespectful to him on purpose to bait him. He didn't take the bait. You know, I said very aggressive and rude things. I won't repeat them because the baby's there, right?
Oh, he can't hear it, so he good.
Oh, okay, all right. Yeah, I just told him like, yo, eat a dick. You know, just the most absolutely disrespectful things that I could say to him, as like men could be offended by.
Right.
He wasn't in control of his response. He was just afraid. And so his fear made him just kind of be quiet. And I was like, it didn't really work, right? But now here's the other backdrop to that. I know we've went through security. I know he's not armed. I know I can take that dude. Based on what I see, I could take that dude. And I could be wrong. Bad guy gets to say. but I could probably take this dude. We aren't armed. He doesn't have a knife. It won't really turn into anything. I might be able to get something from this. And that's why I kind of rolled the dice. Nothing happened of it. We move on. And as soon as I leave, he's back to Twitter and doing the thing, or X, right? My point in saying that is that's a more controlled environment that I had some sort of benefit from. If it's not a controlled environment and there's no benefit, I'm not interested.
Right.
So I see this a lot in the liberty space. People say and do things and they package it as, oh, it's just words, but they're not manly.
Right.
They're like, it's not manly for him to, it's very manly for him to want to protect his son. It's not manly for him to not be objective and go, what is some total of circumstances that made this scenario happen? It was babies playing, shit happens. My son needs a few scars here and there. I'm going to coach him through this situation. That's more of the manly play. Right. But you're engaging somebody that wants to virtue signal their toughness, as opposed to utilizing that moment to toughen up their boy. Right. And so that gives you an indication of his character or lack thereof. Right. And so, but in that moment where you weren't thinking tactically and strategically and responded based on, that you're right, you got sucked into that room where that potential deep threat was, instead of pieing the room very wide to see all you could see in the room ahead of time. Right. But it still just turns into a lesson, and I commend you for turning it into the lesson here, because it's and then everybody else can benefit from it.
Right. Now, I got one more question in just a moment, but I do want to point out to people, I don't consider myself to be a tough guy. Okay. So this is not a situation where I was like, I'll just go be a tough guy. And I've been in fights before. I've been in group fights before, so on and so forth. Right. So I have an idea of, I know what it's like to take a punch to the face and kicks to the chest and a few other things, because, when I was younger, I was a lot more loose with my mouth. So let's just say it that way. So I have an idea of what I'm getting myself into. Now, you never know fully, because again, like you said earlier, you don't know how far they're going to take it. We saw that with the video where the two girls got in a fight and the one girl smacked the other girl's head on the concrete. Right. Yeah. And so she took it very, very
so
far,
the interesting part about that video, the girl that got her head smacked started the fight.
Right.
Which is like, go ahead.
Yeah, it's wild. And so, but I want to tell people, I'm like, while I was willing to stand up to this guy, because I was very annoyed at the situation, and I kind of, I guess you could say, I don't want to say I lost my temper, because I didn't I lost my sense of objectivity on what I should be doing. There was still some intimidation there. One, the man, he's bigger than me, right? Yeah. So I know where this goes. I know that, sometimes little dudes can scrap, and I've seen it before. I've seen little dudes just wallop on a bigger guy, like that happens. But I've also seen bigger dudes put a wallop on a smaller guy. Yeah. And I've had the wallop, so I know what it feels like. So I'm intimidated. And then there was a point where he was up in my face, and my son actually walks up close, like within 10 feet or so. And I'm like, Zach, stay over there, buddy. And now, instead of confronting a guy because I don't like the situation, now I've got the situation that I don't like, and I've got my son closer than I prefer. Yep. So now it's turned into, I need to definitely stand in between my son and this man. Now, I don't think the man was going to do, like, he obviously wasn't going to fight anybody, because he didn't. But I think even less worry, it may sound weird to people, but even less worry, the read was, he wasn't going to harm any kids. Because I know at one point earlier, like the woman was like shooing her kid away, and he's like, I ain't going to hit your kid. I ain't stupid, or something like that. Yeah. Right. So I think he had enough control to at least not hit a kid at any point. I think I'll give him that. Yeah. But again, I don't know this. I don't know for sure. I don't know where it will go.
He was telling you his fears. He was telling you, in essence, my kid is all I have. I've been a fuck up my whole life, and I got to do this one thing right. And if my kid is hurt, what am I going to do? Right. He's in essence telling you what his weaknesses and fears are. Right. Hence, when I hear that, and him saying, even in the middle of him yelling, he still has the wherewithal to say, I'm not out here trying to beat up people's kids. I'm worried about my kid getting hit and hurt. Right. Which is why I tend to go, hey man, I redirect.
Right.
Hey man, your boy, you want me to take you over to? That's crazy, man. You want me to? I don't know if you guys drive, but you want to ride up to the emergency room real quick. Now I have to make him make a decision between, do you want to keep talking about this ego problem that you have and your fear, or do
Hmm.
you want to address a potential solution for
Right.
what may be the issue? When you start placing responsibility on people, when people call me to do stuff, right?
Mhm.
I generally go, yeah, and let's do this too. Or I immediately go, cool, let's do it.
Right.
And now I have to lock you into this thing that you said you wanted to do.
Right.
So I go, hey, this, you're right here. I got a car. I don't know if y'all got a car. Let's take the baby up to the street. Now he's got to think about, well, I got to sit in the emergency room for an hour and
Hmm.
and blah, 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 blah. Now, if you don't really want to do that, you got to shut the fuck up about this
Right.
big deal that you're having about your kid potentially being hurt. If it's just a little knock on the head, that'll give them a nice little lesson.
Right.
I was literally climbing trees with kids of like last week.
Hmm.
And I coached some of these kids to go really high up in this tree. They were so afraid initially, and I just talked them through it, and they left with a much bigger sense of competence and confidence. So
Hmm.
this forces them to have to engage and not let them just relax on what they're afraid of. Similar
Right.
to this gentleman. I'm
Right.
not going to let you relax. And it's a valued and valid position, which
Mhm.
is, if something happens to my boy, oh my God,
Right.
I get it. But I promise you that the other 8-year-old is not out here trying to like toss your kid off a tree or
Right.
toss him off the seesaw. But
Right.
his fear dictated his response.
Hmm.
And then when that fear response happens, everybody seems to become the enemy when you're not thinking clearly.
Right.
When people have nowhere to turn, they turn on each other.
Right.
So, and when I see that, and this all comes through training and just paying
Hmm.
attention to the psychology of humans, what people do when their backs up against the wall. This is why we express to everybody should take some fighting, everybody
Hmm.
should weight train, everybody should take some scenario firearms training, and get some of those soft skills in reading people and recognizing what's happening. When I
Right.
see that, I go, oh man, he feels like he has nobody to turn to. I'll give him an option of somebody to turn to. Hey man, yeah, that is crazy. We're now on the same team. Hey man, let's take your boy up to Sting. Do
Yeah.
you wanna do that, man?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Deflect, avoid if you can,
Hmm.
de-escalate as the secondary option, and engagement is the third and weakest of the three.
Right. Yeah, we learned it when I took martial arts as a kid. We learned it as the ABCs of fighting: avoid, back away, conquer.
Yep.
And the first two were the absolute most critical ones. Um, now I will say it was interesting because once my son gets closer to me, now I've got my own fear, because my fear isn't so much getting beat up, although that wasn't, I wasn't like not afraid entirely. It was, what happens if man pummels me down, and then I'm no longer available to protect my son, or even
Yep.
just take him home, right?
Yep.
Like, what happens to him? So now I'm concerned about that. And then of course I'm also concerned as a man. I'm like, do I really want my son to see his daddy get beat up? like, like
Or
that's not cool either.
otherwise.
Right,
Or
right,
do I want my son? Does my son have the experience and understanding of fighting to recognize that if I choke the living shit out of this dude,
right.
will my son be like afraid of me now? These are all questions on that spectrum that we have to ask. And
Yep.
if that's where it comes back into, let me expose my child to these bigger concepts, because I have to make sure that he's seeing a full spectrum of, we know how to fight and train to be as deadly and dangerous as possible, but we are loving, empathetic, supportive, positive humans, and,
Hmm.
by Americans, and then by extension humans. if
Right.
if I have not uh, given the babies that level of understanding right from that, even if as we get out of this scenario, I
Hmm.
got to start inculcating him in that culture that
Right.
way, so he can have that understanding. So if I do happen to get in a defensive situation and it happens to be a defensive gun usage, if I have to shoot the shit out of somebody, my son 100% knows that it was to defend life and protect from imminent threat. If
Right.
I'm in a scenario where the other person physically gets the best of me, well, this is what happens sometimes. You don't win every single fight. You don't win
Right.
any fights. You just survive them. And this one I survived, but the other dude got a little bit of the best of me. All
Right.
of these things are 1000% teachable moments that have to be looked at as such. The most impactful way to do that is to avoid it and to explain that same gambit of what could have happened, so-called positive or so-called negative,
Right.
to the baby without even having to engage. I win every single fight that I'm not a part of.
Right.
That's my
Absolutely.
ethos.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And again, it's when I know that I'm going into a space or the potential for a troll, right, that would try to be disrespectful to me or would try to be whatever just to get cloud or internet cloud or whatever, or to try to bait me. I know that I could beat the shit out of a lot of these people. I know
Yeah.
that I could. I'm just not interested in even engaging because you're then going to say, see, Maj is the low IQ troglodyte that he
Mhm.
calls other low IQ troglodytes. And he happens to be black and he has poor impulse control. And reverse it. Let's say I happen to be white, right? Or you'll have a live logical breakdown with somebody via social media. They'll try to bait you, or they may say, oh, DL is a small dude and he's identified himself as not a tough guy. So they'll try to bully you in those particular spaces. None of that shit helps the movement. None of
Right.
that shit puts any money in our pockets. None of that shit helps us grow fruits and vegetables. None of that shit is going to add
Right.
more ammo to the stash. So it becomes like, if I am well versed in um, making sure that I can get home to my family.
Yes.
I still do not go to places where I think somebody's going to try to bait me or there's the potential or a higher level of potential for conflict.
Right.
Because I don't want to have a weak moment where I respond emotionally and then it impacts libertarian movement as a whole. It impacts people that identify as conservative. The left paints them as such. The bigots in the movement on
Mhm.
right of center say, see, can't take the blacks anywhere. I am a
Right.
walking, as a dad, as a leader, we are walking representations of what we're supposed to be as
Right.
it relates to, again, empathy, facts, and solutions.
Mhm.
I am going to lead with empathy to this gentleman who's hurting, that he is afraid to death that something could happen to his baby boy on his watch. We don't know the situation with his ex-wife, his baby mom, that's like just gave him the baby. He just got access back to his son,
Mhm.
and then the first time he takes her home, the baby boy home, Mama Bear is like, hell no, you're not taking him out of it. We do not know what's on the other side of that phone. And
Right.
so in leading with that empathy and trying to diffuse is priority number one. Now, if you can't, you avoid,
Mhm.
you get away from it.
Right.
But I think this was an excellent teachable moment, and you got at least 3 takeaways from this that you'll never be in this scenario ever again. It just won't happen.
Right. Last question, and I think this is a very, very important one, especially in our movement, because I view a lot of people who in our movement are willing to talk a lot of crap online. And then I'm not so certain that they're nearly as prepared to even be in just a simple fight in the real world.
Yeah.
And I know that it's very popular for libertarians to carry. So I'm nose to nose with this guy. He's
Mm-hmm.
yelling in my face. He's angry. Now I had a little sense of some things what not to do to make it worse in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
Don't ball your fist up. Do not touch the man.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I had pushed him and said, "Get back from me," like that could have eased that. Like that would have probably started a fight right
You
there.
hit me.
Right. Basically, I mean that's how it's perceived. Like even a push to get him away is perceived as you just hit me now it's fight is on.
Go
Um,
time.
if I said any number of words, to him like "you drunk, you idiot, you," I know it's popular right now. Everybody's all like, "Oh, did we get an N word pass because the white girl said it online?" Like if you had said, like if I had said anything along, any kind of insult whatsoever, that could have turned things. And then if I was armed, at what point? Because here's my concern is that somebody might find themselves in a situation they're being yelled at nose to nose. It seems scary. They've maybe never been in a fight, which I have.
Mm-hmm.
So but they might not be. And they might say, this is the point where I need to pull out my firearm and start shooting. So for
Yeah.
you, based on this story, is there a point that you heard where a firearm would have been appropriate to even pull out?
No.
Okay.
And if you would have had a gun on you, you wouldn't have even engaged him. I'm
Probably
super
not.
nice. If you see me being, well, I'm not threatening to people at all generally. But if I'm more like, come on, man, let's go. It's probably a time when I'm not armed. And I know that it's just going to be a fight. Right.
Mhm.
But if I'm armed, I'm not putting the other person or myself in that predicament. Again, the Trump scenario. I'm like, Secret Service, everybody got patted down. There's no knives. There probably won't be a loss of life in this space. Let's see. I've already tried to avoid.
Mhm.
He's trying to still be annoying. Let's see if I can get something out of this that works, right? A little bit less responsible, but
Mhm.
some total of circumstances, I go, right? But when you got a gun on you, you're more like, nope. Because I'm definitely, if you put me in that space, I'm 100% gonna. I gotta do what I gotta do.
Right.
So it's like I don't. A gun, ironically, like people that fight and train, you never see Floyd Mayweather getting in fights as he moves about.
Mhm.
You never see mixed martial arts fighters getting in fights outside of the ring. It's like
Mhm.
one, you kind of go like, man, I'll crush this dude. I 100% fuck this dude up. If you're a professional fighter, it becomes, is it worth losing my license? Is it worth losing the bag? I'm not interested. And if you're actually in any way, shape, or form a good person, you think that way the more you train. Same thing with a firearm. It's like this guy has no idea. I got 30 some odd rounds minimum on me right now.
Mhm.
This dude has no idea. He's walking. I have the power of death in my waistband. And
Mhm.
he doesn't know it. It's unfair. If you're a good person, you think that way. And I recognize you as a good person. So
Mhm.
if you
Mhm.
had a gun, you wouldn't have even done it. You would, I promise you, more than likely, you would have not even said anything. You would have more than likely said, all right, come on, we out.
Right.
We out.
So, is there a general guideline for, because here's the thing that, like, if I've never been in a fight, right?
Mhm.
I don't know at what point I
It's
need
justified.
to, that it's justified. I need to pull it out. Now, in my opinion, let's just say that I was in that situation yesterday and I had a firearm. Let's just
Mhm.
say somehow I got there,
Yeah.
nose to nose. I personally still wouldn't have pulled it out, in my opinion,
You,
because I recognize that there is still time to for this to not happen, right? Like
bro,
for me.
the time is there an imminent threat? We go over this in our understanding imminent threat class.
Mhm.
Everybody should follow on Twitter, X, and you should take the links. I'll post it right directly after this.
Sure.
Um, our understanding imminent threat class, there has to be an identifiable, and present threat.
Mhm.
It has to be identifiable and it has to be present. And you can't get to move towards it to make it identifiable or present. If I go towards the thing when I could have went away from the thing, it
Mhm.
is not an imminent threat. That's why warning shots are not real. That's some TV shit.
Mhm.
Because if I have time to put a shot in the air, first of all, you shouldn't shoot what goes up must come down. That's one.
Correct. Right.
Two, if you have time to do that, you had time to leave.
Mhm.
That's it. So if the guy would have been, I don't know who did this to my child, and he had a knife in his hand, he was like, "Who? I'm stabbing everybody in the park. I'm
Right.
100% gonna clear my garment, present, and I'm gonna stop the threat. It's
Right.
present and it's identifiable." That
Right.
dude got mad about whatever reason, and he decided to pull his box cutter out and start going 9/11 on people, allegedly, right?
Mhm.
Trying to stab people and all that other shit. Then it's an immediate threat. If it does not fit the criteria that you can articulate in court of that is Jason from Friday the 13th, that's the machete that he had, those are the two people that he stabbed, that's him right there, and he got 17 holes in him because I got a whole mag off and I only got a couple, I reloaded and I only had to hit him one more time, and that's Jason. And here's the firearm right here. throw me the parade. That's the
Mhm.
present and identifiable threat, and that's the threat shit that he was doing. If it does not meet that criteria, it does not meet the criteria. And if
Mhm.
you pull your firearm, and I'm not saying the potential going from condition orange to condition or yellow to orange or even orange to red, I'm not saying, and if you don't know what those conditions are, everyone should
Mhm.
sign up for the class. It's only $20 and it's an online class. If you, it's tonight actually. If you do not meet the criteria for that, then you shouldn't shoot. But it may meet the criteria where you clear your garment and you may even be at a high ready and have the firearm drawn down on somebody and you're issuing commands. I may actually have my finger indexed, not on the
Mhm.
trigger,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Indexed along the frame of the, not the next level training cert pistol, but the actual pistol, right? I may be issuing commands. I may be yelling, get the out of here, Jason. And Jason may walk away and I may not have to shoot Jason. Then
Mhm.
I may be able to pull out my emergency first aid kit, dictate to people what to do, and stop the bleed on the people because they need my attention and to save their life more than I need to take Jason's life. So
Mhm.
if I can present the firearm and issue commands, that may be what needs to do. But if there is not a present and immediate threat to life
Mhm.
and you shoot someone, good luck rolling the dice in that case, especially every place ain't Florida, bro. You might live in New Jersey. And that's a different thing. So that's the only
Uh-oh. Looks like we lost him. All right. We'll see if he jumps back on here real quick. But let's see here. Oh, there he is. Let me add him back to the stage. There you are.
um hold
Uh,
on one second.
yep.
That is the only justifiable space where you could actually do that. And
Awesome.
if not, I hope you got a solid lawyer on retainer. I
Right.
hope you can explain exactly what was going on because there may be context that I'm not aware of in that
Mhm.
scenario.
Mhm.
But as a rule of thumb, that's where we go.
Got it. All right. Any final words before we close up?
If you got any value from this today, two things. One, support. Make sure that you're in alignment with um, training people for these types of scenarios. And that's what we do. We do in-person classes and we do online. We're
Mhm.
asking everyone to donate. We're trying to buy the Solutionary Center, the building. Support that with a donation at givesendgo.com/solutionary. If you're on my X page, follow, and the link is in the bio. But support. We're asking everybody. We need 2,076 more donors at the $100 level to end all of the fundraising. But if you can't give $100, give what you can. Or if it's super, super tight, Bidenomics, right? Sign up to be a $5 a month recurring donor. This is the information that we give to people in our basics firearms class, in our what do you call it? Understanding imminent threat class, civics class, yoga,
Mhm.
sewing machines, whatever. All of these in-person classes are free to all because of your voluntary donations, and we need everybody's support to do that. And lastly, just be kind to each other, everybody. Lead with empathy, obviously. Be very, very capable of doing what you got to do if need be, but lead with empathy and be kind to each other. You do not know what's every struggle that every other person is going through, and they may not in that moment be able to deal with it at the best way. So if it's not to a point of imminent threat, try to lead in with a little bit more empathy, grace, and understanding, and be kind to yourself as well. The government tried to murder you 4 years ago, for 2 years. They tried the biggest psyop, and they practiced the biggest psyop the world has ever saw.
Mhm.
They closed down businesses. They told you could not eat healthy food and go out in the sun and be in the ocean, and you survived. So if you're a little
Mhm.
bit stressed right now, remember to be kind to yourself. You are here. You can email me. My email is majtoure@gmail.com. If you want to talk about some things, if you're dealing with some sort of depression, just know that you might not know me per se, or I may not know you, but I care for you. And I would rather listen to you talk about your issues than read your obituary. So be kind to each other, donate if you can, share this podcast all over the place. And thank you all for listening.
Awesome. Thank you, Maj. I'm gonna put you backstage. You can stay there for a second if you want, or if you got to head out, that too. Be just a moment. Thank you, everybody, for watching. I hope you found this episode informative and inspiring, and I hope you have learned something from it. It's always a good thing where we can maybe make a mistake, live to tell about the mistake, and learn from it, and then learn from other people's mistakes. It is certainly not a good idea to engage with people. So Liberty Dad was absolutely wrong, and that is okay. But I survived, and I'm here. And then next time I will do better, because that is the goal, to always do better. Be sure to catch me Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. Eastern, for an informed discussion on politics and culture. Make sure that you're subscribed to my YouTube channel, or if you prefer my Rumble channel, you can go to youtube.libertydad.com, rumble.libertydad.com for the Rumble listener audience. And then while you're there, let me know how I'm doing by leaving me a comment. By the way, everything that Maj says, I'll make sure that they are in the show notes so that you can find them ever so easily. Last but not least, I want you to remember, if you're a champion of liberty, your business is people and your product is liberty. I want you to have a great week and weekend. Catch you next time. But for now, I'm out.